It is so fantastic to be back in real time, with real people in a gallery and to have a conversation about art, which I think we've all missed. And I'm particularly delighted that Clare asked me to be in conversation with her on the occasion of this exhibition. I'm a huge admirer of Clare's practice, and as I'm sure you all are. And to do so on the occasion of this new body of work, which is a bit of a departure in terms of media for Clare, I think is an opportunity for us to get an insight into your practice more comprehensively, actually. But I want to begin by just actually asking you how your year's been, because it's been a crazy year, and this show was meant to have happened before this, and some of the works sort of were on the brink of this. So how's your practice been, and how are you doing?
I'm okay. Still here. I've been very lucky, actually, to escape the horrors of homeschooling. I spent 95% of the last year and a half in my studio. So, I fared well. This, pretty much most of this was finished, because I can't remember, it was going to open last July, wasn't it? June or July. But we just started the screen print project, which obviously got delayed a lot, and I was still working on the collage, but actually it gave me more time to produce a couple more collages, and we made the catalogue, which we wouldn't have done, I guess, if lockdown hadn't happened. It was odd to have a show finished and not be able to hang it, not be able to see it, but I think it's been good, actually, the wait and being able to show it now, because the last year's been so intense in the studio. It's been solid weeks, which has been incredible. So this is, like you say, another way of looking at the practice. So it's been good to be able to see this now a year later, because it all came to the gallery and then didn't see it for a year. So
it'd be interesting to know what you've been doing in the studio with this more extended period of time that you've had, but I know that's not what we're talking about, but I'm just naturally quite nosy and just want to know what you've been up to in the studio. Just trying to inveigle myself into getting some more information about that. Yeah, we'll have to wait for another talk, I think, to come to that. So, but let's talk about this exhibition, and let's begin with the title, actually, The Great Unknown, which seems to talk to our present moment brilliantly.
I know, it wasn't obviously intended, because it was the great unknown before COVID. It, for me, was... So when I'm painting, I'm really physically in control of the work, and I don't know how it's going to look, but I have a good idea when I'm actually painting it how it's going to look, whereas the printmaking is really scary. It's handing over control to somebody else, and it's trusting a process, and it's trusting. I don't really know what I'm doing. So fortunately, I've been working with brilliant people that do know what they're doing. But there's that moment when you lift something off the press, or you put the last screen on, and it can be so different to how you want it to be, and there's a different process, and there's a gap. There's this. So for me, the great unknown was this gap that printmaking creates, that I don't get in my practice, because I'm so connected to it. It's a space that I'm not touching and I can't control. But obviously it has different connotations now.
And I've noticed that you sometimes refer to this sort of gap between you and, for example, an image, or I'm thinking about the way that you might have a preference towards, for example, a found photograph rather than a made photograph, because you feel that there's this gap of an exchange, and likewise in this process there seems to be a space that you're interested in. Can you just talk a little bit about what that opportunity is?
But I think with the source material, it's because everything, all my paintings, all the works on paper, the print, the collage, it all starts with a photograph, and without that photograph it doesn't exist. So that source photograph is really important. But I like it when it's not something I've photographed, or I don't know how big it is, I don't know what the colour is, especially if it's a black and white photograph, or I don't know what time of day it was photographed, or if it's an object, I don't know how it feels, or anything about it. It's just that one presentation on that photograph. It creates a space that there's not preconceived ideas about colour, or which is really, really good, and that's what I like about found source material. And I think there is a link between that and the printing, that part that I haven't got total control over. Yeah,
so there is something about this control as well, and relinquishing that, and the kind of the accidental opportunity, and then working.
But I think the way the paintings are made, they're very like I say, I start off with the source photographs the same as these, and then there's a drawing, and then I paint. When I paint, I'm mixing the paint on the aluminium panel flat, so it becomes like the palette, and it's very instinctive. Whereas with the printing and the collaging, it's slow. It's really slow. Like I could make, the time it took to make one of these size collages, I could make 4 big paintings. Yeah. It's a very, very slow and very laborious and absolutely mind-numbingly boring sometimes process. It's very different.
Yeah. I want to ask you about where printmaking and working on paper has sat in your practice to date, because I believe this is your first really substantial presentation of works on paper. And is there a why now kind of question about this? Or
well, firstly, because Alan and Helen and David have been amazingly supportive and have gone with it and given me the opportunity. I have made prints in the past, but usually just one-off prints, never as part of a bigger body, or it's kind of been disparate or away from the practice, whereas this is sat within the practice more.
Yeah.
But that is the support. That is the support here to do that. And this has been a long time coming. We've been, I don't know, 5 years, maybe 6 years talking and doing little projects, and it hasn't happened like that.
And but I think you have made collages before. I remember reading in the catalogue that you'd actually done some work with collages.
I did a residency in Mallorca, maybe 5-6 years ago. I don't know. I've lost a year. I'm really confused. And I could only take what I could really put in a suitcase. So I took paper, oil paint, and when I got there, I went to the local DIY store and got some white spirit, and that was it. And it was really hot. It was like 34 degrees. I started just painting some paper, and it was drying instantly. And I was like, wow, this is quick. This is good. And I started painting paper, and that's how the collage started, really. It was slightly accidental, and it was having really tight boundaries without my usual materials around.
Well, maybe we can talk a bit about the different media, because we've got collages and then screen prints and then monotypes. And maybe we can talk about these different techniques that are involved, and also your selection of imagery, because you've stayed within certain kind of subject matter for some media, which I'm quite interested in. But maybe we can begin with the collages, and if we take it as read that you've had an opportunity to look at the works in detail. But if we can talk about some of the collages, and can you just talk us through the process of creating the work?
Well, the collage, the paper that I use for the collage is a byproduct of the painting. So at an end of weeks and weeks of painting, you just end up with these little bits of paint, and I can't bear throwing anything away, so I just mix it with white spirit and thin it and paint paper. And I've got boxes and boxes of like filed green, pink, orange around the studio, and that's where the material comes from. It was really having the opportunity to do this show that got me to scale up, because they do take so long, and I've started some that I've never finished because I've just got so bored, which is a terrible thing to admit. But this pushed the scale, which was really good to push that scale of the work, because I'm much more comfortable on a larger scale.
But do they begin again? So they begin with a photograph, and then you do an acetate drawing.
And they're all pretty much. There's no painting of this one, but most of them are painting exists of the collage, and the painting has come first. Right. Okay. So they've been made alongside a painting, using the same source material, but dealing with it in a similar way, because the paintings I draw, I cut the masking tape, and then I work on the aluminium within these confines of a drawing, and the collage is still based very much on a drawing. So it's a very tight drawing, and that is the mask then for drawing the paper, or tracing onto the paper, and then cutting the paper and then sticking the paper, which is... Yeah.
And I have a sense that you found that actually quite laborious.
It's painful, because I'm not very patient, and I'm not very good with detail, I don't think. I observe detail, and I want detail, but when it's actually me doing it, and it's only me that can stick it back down. But a lady that works for me, she's fantastic, and she did a lot of the cutting, because I really did get to the point where I didn't think I could finish it.
And things like the actual, you're such a brilliant colorist. How do you approach the composition of color? That must be quite a meticulous process of organising your materials. And
Well, I start with the background, as I do with the painting, and build up the background with colour paper. And as I said, everything's filed, so I've got these huge box files of pink, green. It's all very, very basic. It's not cool, technical. And then I start building from light to dark. So I'll work with the lighter colours first.
Oh, right.
And it is just literally laying them under the drawing, working out the direction of the brush mark, how it works with the colour that's already there. It's slow.
But there's a really close relationship to your painting practice then, as you're working with the residual materials and of course the actual brush marks.
Yeah,
as
so
well,
I'm adjusting the
collaging,
brush mark of the paper, not actually painting it. So.
Yeah, yeah. There's no overpainting of any of these, because sometimes I was looking at these and it's not always clear what's going on technically, which I find interesting.
No, there's nothing, once they're stuck down. And there's elements of spray paint as well to make gradients and on
right,
top.
okay.
But no, once they're stuck down, that's it.
Yeah. Can I ask you about your choice of subject matter for the collages, which is slightly more diverse, but also very personal, like your children are?
Well, I guess the collage, they're all based on paintings, so they've all existed within the painting. So they weren't necessarily chosen because they are going to work in collage, or collage lends itself to a certain type of image or genre. It was more, I knew there were paintings that I wanted to remake or deconstruct and make again in paper.
Mm-hmm. And that was the thing you were interested in this bit of a deconstruction of painting. So what has it added to your practices as a painter?
Well, like I say, painting, I make a painting in one day. The actual process of painting, that might be like 8 hours, but it's one day of painting. I never stop until it's actually finished. So this was making a very slow painting, backwards almost in a way. I don't think I can articulate exactly what it was, but I know I've learned a lot about colour and structure and really formal elements of the painting.
Has it changed your approach to painting so far, or is that still something that's evolving?
I don't think it's changed my approach. It's made me appreciate painting a lot more.
It's a lot quicker.
It'll be a while before I make collage again. Yeah.
And we were talking earlier about the, I think, really wonderful ways in which you've got these raggy edges that really heighten the sculptural aspect.
You can't do that with it, and it was like, I think, like I studied as a sculptor, so this was really nice. This was like properly using materials. So that piece of paper was too short, but it didn't matter. Whereas obviously with the painting, you have the edge, and I work to the edge, and I always work to the edges.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that so incredibly satisfying, and with these, the way that they're coming, I mean, they really do.
It's probably just bad planning to start with, but I've made the background too small. But it kind of just felt right.
And so, can I ask you about the different images that you've chosen? Because I know that you find yourself attracted to a very wide range of images. But for example, this rather curious, this hand here, which feels almost like a benefaction almost of sorts.
It was
sorry that you can't assume that you've seen it, but this yellow work here.
Yeah, it was a friend of mine who's a chef, and he's been really ill, and it was just an image that popped up on Instagram, on his Instagram feed, and he'd been in hospital and had like a cannula in with a bandage, but it looked so Christ-like. I wanted to use it, and I painted it, and I've painted it a few times, and I've drawn it and made the collage. So it's been a reoccurring theme, I think.
Yeah, and these images here, these are of your
That's
son.
Sid, my son, yeah.
Yeah, and
when he was much younger, and this is him with a cat. So
and we were talking earlier about this being sort of echoing, referring to the famous Freud.
Kitty.
Yeah, with the kind of slightly strangulated looking.
That's what I was thinking about
cat.
when I was making. Well, it all, like I say, it all comes from photography. So when I saw this photograph again after years of not seeing it, I was like, oh, okay, I know I want to use that. And he was having quite a hard time at that point, so we bought him some kittens, and I really don't like cats, to be fair. And it was a big thing to get these cats in the house. And and it helped. And it's called Comforters. So
It looks like a really grumpy cat as well.
It is.
But so, is this because of your maltreatment of it?
They've gone now. They live with Simon Wallace in Leeds.
Oh, really?
They've moved on. They did what they needed to do. And now they're bringing joy to someone else.
Right. They're art world cats then, by the sounds of it. And I really want to talk to you about your titles actually across all of the work, because I think they generate such a range of associations and questions as a layer, another kind of collage almost on top of the work.
Yeah.
But I was really alarmed to hear that you have something like 23,000
Yeah, I have a lot of
titles.
It's just I've been collecting them for a long time.
That's a lot of titles. But then how do you work with that kind of material, and how does an image choose a title, or how does that work?
Well, first, should I answer the question? So first of all, the title, I don't particularly want Untitled. It's not something that I always feel disappointed when something's untitled, because I want more. I want another way into people's work, and I like to offer another way in, and but not necessarily descriptive titles either, that are telling you what you're looking at. They just need to be separate in a way. And I can't title anything till it's finished. These have all got the titles of the paintings, because they are essentially, they connect to the paintings. But I don't title anything till it's finished and it's stood up. And then I tend to know what the title's going to be. And I have got a huge list of titles, but you go down 3 or 4 pages and they're old. You know, they don't really fit anymore.
But these titles are called Collage 4.
Yeah.
It's almost like a sort of
Gift.
a gift.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about that? Because presumably that isn't the title of the paintings.
No, I have no idea. It just was, I don't know. I really don't know. And there's a lot about the practice, and this is what I've been thinking about a lot recently. A lot I don't understand until way after, because it's quite instinctive. It's not conceptual planning. This is what this is going to be, and this is what it's going to look like. It's very much, there's a feeling for a source image. I make the work, I title it, and then 2 years later I go, oh, that's what it's about. You know, it's a slow process. So I don't know why, but I'm sure I will maybe in a year's time. Yeah,
maybe we'll have to come back and do round 2 of this conversation.
But yeah, it feels like they belong to the paintings. They're like companion pieces in a way. Yeah,
because it was quite intriguing seeing that sort of idea of something being, it's like sort of a gesture of
because they're made after, so it's not for as in I made this and then made the painting. It's more like they belong to the painting.
Yeah. I want to ask you about your screen prints, and again the process that's involved. Is it a similar process again, working from photographs with an acetate and then kind of blocking out the colour? And did you enjoy that? Because I mean, I'm hoping you've enjoyed some aspect of this production.
I didn't. I don't like cutting and sticking. It's really boring. But no, it's not a process I really understood, or it took me a while to get it. To be fair, how many colours are there in these? There's a lot of layers, isn't there? How many? 31. Okay, so it's 31 colours, and I knew the image I wanted to work with, and I'm about colour. I really find black and white. I'm always trying to make black and white paintings, and they're awful. I just can't do it. I can't work just black and white. It doesn't. So, say for this one, I had to make each screen as a film, which is just black on see-through film, and that was going to be the colour. So when you laid them all up, it was solid. Yeah. Oh man, yeah. It took me a long while, and a few goes to get my head around the process. And once I did, it was good. And I think understanding now the process, I know how I could have done it differently. And if I did it, if I got the chance to do it again, I know what I would do.
So unlike collages where you're not going to be chomping at the bit to do that,
I want to do something. I want to do something really big. I want the opportunity to do a really big one piece, a really big piece. But not just yet.
Can we talk about the subject of these flowers?
Well, I wanted these were a suite, like a set that wanted to work together, and I wanted to all be still life.
And you've talked about this interest in flower. Actually, you talk about Manet in the catalogue, and the series of paintings that Manet did at the end of his life when he was dying, of people friends bringing flowers for him and then painting them, really moving, quite famous series of works that he did. And he also talked about the fact that, you know, an artist can say everything that there is to say through flowers or fruit or clouds. And so I guess I'd be interested to know what it is that's drawn you to this subject matter.
Well, again, they are paintings. I've painted these, and I was trying to think about how a group would work together. And for me, screen print is still quite graphic. It's still on or off and black and white. And I wanted to try and work out how I could loosen that and open it and make it more brush-like, because the most printing I'd done before here was litho, stone litho, which is, although I don't know technically, I couldn't print it for you, but I know how to make it work. And I think that's why I wanted to use the flowers. I wanted to use something fluid, something that would lend itself to a certain movement or mark.
But you've also talked about the fact that these flowers, if you like, represent in that conventional historical genre way everything about life, the beginning of life, and then the fragility of life, and then the demise ultimately.
Yeah, and I think after lockdown, the still life genre feels it's got a very different place for me now. I'm thinking about it very differently.
Well, can you elaborate on
that?
Okay, you're being a real tease. We're going to have to come back for round 2 of this talk. So yeah, but I think a lot of artists have found themselves in a very interior mode during lockdown. Obviously, they've been in their studios, or I've noticed that there's a tendency for lots of artists to have these quite journalistic or diaristic kind of reflections on the domestic spaces, and these feel that although they predate that, they feel that they do resonate with that kind of mode of production.
Yeah, that's why the show was kind of planned and arranged before lockdown, but seeing it now after lockdown, but still during pandemic, it feels very different.
Yeah. And these sit alongside other images that you've created that have got this slightly dark aspect to them as well. It certainly seems to me like some images that are of, like this image of this bandaged hand, or the mouth that's kind of open, and there's one of the images, I'm not sure where it is, there it is, of this mouth that's open, or a head that looks like it's sort of kind of decapitated from the body, but quite restful. There's a darkness as well alongside these images that generate this idea of fragility in life, that gets generated by some of the subject matter in the show.
I think also for the materials and the 3 sort of types of work in here, it was led by subject matter, because the monotypes needed to be fluid, like a one gestural mark, because of the way they were made. Can you talk a bit about those technically, because those are the most abstract works? Yeah. Again, I'd never done monotype, but I kind of had a much better idea of how it would work. So there's two imprints, would you call it? 2 imprints, but 4 colours. So they've got a lot of colour mixed in. So I was rolling the colour onto like a Perspex plate, and then using a sock with white spirit to take it all off, essentially. So like a reductive. So I was taking it away so you could see what had been printed underneath. But it was all like one gesture, one mark, and quick. Wow. It had to be really quick. So I felt much more comfortable there, because it was very hands-on and I was in control. And there's 4 of each. Obviously, none of them are the same, although they're a similar image. And I quite like that process. They are unique, but similar. And again, they're printed, and it's
very quick.
Yeah, it's very quick.
You seem to have a preference for these processes that are a bit more immediate, a bit more aligned to your painting, sort of like
definitely
speed.
Maybe I'm just really impatient.
Well, that's fine.
But that's how it felt. I suppose I felt physically more engaged in it. So.
And the imagery again that you've selected there, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, they're images that I've worked with before, but it was like the poodle. I wanted this continual line, this movement that I could get from the shape and the flowers and the tree.
Yes.
They're all. So the tree was quite a nice one because I haven't painted or used landscape for quite a long time, and it was a tree I'd photographed in Austria up a mountain in a whiteout, and I'd got kind of stuck and I had to sit next to this tree because I was a bit like, I'm not quite sure what's going on here. And it was when I sat there and I was taking photos of it, and I could see the sort of the movement of the branches and the snow on the branches, and just it was like that would work really well as a painting. That's going to paint well. So it's just a feeling, really.
But that you had the presence of mind in that moment when you're in the middle of a whiteout to take a camera.
It was the only thing. It was the only thing there. There was nothing. It was just one tree on the side of this mountain. It was quite incredible, really. Yeah.
But you've titled it something along the lines of the upside
down.
Upside down, and this reference to baselits, I think, also with that. I mean, some of the...
Yeah, because during this sort of whiteout experience I've never had before, I really wasn't sure which was up or down. Even though I was like on the floor, holding on to the floor, I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah, that's weird. I've never experienced that, actually.
Really changed. I couldn't quite... There's no horizon. I was really confused. So that's why it's called the upside down.
But a number of the works have got this idea of a kind of inversion about them through their title, the unloved or there's like a sense of the gap between things, but then things falling as well. That is, to me, generated by the titling that you've chosen. It sort of suggests a kind of a topsy-turviness.
I think if a title can confuse you, great. It's quite good, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it definitely is. And I think the dark associations like around the show were really kind of, I don't know, they really talk to this moment of where things just feel very surreal, like a type of surrealness almost. But it's odd that the work can resonate so differently, like in the present.
Yeah, but I think that's what I'm saying. A year later, it feels very different. The title feels different. The works, especially the sort of screen prints, it all feels slightly different in a good way, in a positive way.
I mean, these different processes, they bring with them a different kind of temporal signature, because as you say, the collages are quite slow, and then other things are much quicker. And in the context of the subject matter, which is this, like say, in the case of the flowers, a subject matter that is associated with this temporal idea, this idea of time passing.
It's a process that's very...
Yeah, I mean, so it wasn't, because I think I understood that you'd actually specifically selected works, subject matter for a certain kind of media almost.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's actually coming more from the relationship with the paintings. Is that right?
Well, they're just images that I've worked with. Literally, it was images that I've worked with that I'd seen as finished images, so I knew that I could work with them again, or I wanted to work with them again. A lot of the time when I'm painting, I'll paint something once and then that's it. It's kind of complete. It's done. There's no need to return to it, or to repaint it, or to think about drawing it, or use it in a different way. But all of the images in here are all works that I've painted that I wanted to do something else with, or wanted to revisit in some way, because it didn't feel quite finished. Or
And do you know what that is, or is it just like an intuitive sort of interest in an image? And do you gather like a stock of images that you're interested in all the time?
It's like the titles, it's an ongoing constant. It started off years ago with like newspaper cuttings. There's boxes and boxes and boxes of slightly damp, magazine photographs and things that I've collected over the years, and now it's all digital.
And you talk about this interest in the way in which imagery has become flattened out in this digital culture, where images that might be very banal are sort of given the same kind of treatment as something that might be quite shocking or violent or distressing.
It's more processing. I think it's the way, like, I'm absolutely addicted to Instagram. I love, before Instagram, I'd go to someone's house and say, well, let's have a look at your photo albums. I love looking at pictures. I don't care if I don't know who's in them or anything about them. I just love processing photos. So I know I'm totally guilty of like whizzing through photos without really, really looking or taking in the importance sometimes of what I'm really looking at.
And how, I know that photography is central in your practice. It's a sort of a point of departure, but where does it sit as as a photographic practice? Do you have an independent photographic practice at all?
I wish. No, my photos are terrible. It is just, sometimes I see things and I need a picture of it. That is it. I'm not a photographer on any level. And digital photography has, but I still get them printed out to A3. So I used to take whatever I'd found in the newspaper or the magazine and photocopy it, and now I send my digital files off and get them printed. So I always work from a paper. I never work, and I don't adapt the image digitally. I sometimes adapt it on paper. I get 2 or 3 copies of an image and I'll collage it together to adjust it slightly, but I don't work on the digital image.
And do you also have a huge archive of, how do you organise your imagery? Is it like a bit like your collaged offcuts? And
it's there is some kind of organisation to it, which nobody else would obviously understand. When every few years, because there's a drawing with the photograph, so every few years I'll just box up used images that I'm totally finished with, that I know I'm never going to use again, and then there's some random kind of filing system in the studio with piles and piles of images that I spend hours going through trying to find things that I think I know where they are, but I don't. So yeah, it would be so much easier if it was all digital and I work digitally, but I just need the paper.
And do you ever collage from your photographs as finished works? No.
The source material and the drawing, it's just purely a tool. So most of the time it's covered in paint, it's got masking tape all over it, and I've drawn on it with marker pen and made notes and stuff. So it's just totally, it's a tool to, and I suppose that's why this was so nice, because I've never done a body of works on paper, because I work with paper and drawing and bits of collage in the studio, but they're all tools. So.
Yeah, that's what's so enjoyable. We were talking earlier about the catalogue that actually Andrew Brown, who sat suitably in the corner over there, has done. And what's really enjoyable about it is the fact that you have all of these images that are from the studio, and you get a real insight about the production of the work.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And really, the sort of mood board and the way that you've created things, which I think is really enjoyable, because this show really generates a question that is, I think, about the different techniques that are involved. Because you seem to be incredibly you're being very modest and saying, I'm not really sure that I know what you're doing. But
really good people to work with, seriously. Yeah.
And your drawings, where do your drawings sit in all of this? Because they're also an important part of your practice.
They're just like a tool. I've never shown drawings, or they sort of get put away in boxes with the photographs and the notes. And so I've started being a bit more, putting an archive together. But yeah, they don't stand on their own at all. Well, they just feel like they're part of a process. They're not. So this is why having this opportunity I've made a few small collages, but having the opportunity to scale up and have the time to spend the time on it as well, and devote the time. And there's a lot, it took a couple of years to make these collages, with other activities, but it was very time consuming and good for that.
So do you have a sense as to what you'd like to do next with any of these particular media, or at the moment? I'd definitely like to do monotypes again, a bit larger, try something bigger. Screen print, I know much more about it now, but it's still quite tricky. And collage, I would like to work large. I would like to have the opportunity to make some large, see how. So I've got a lot of paper. It's interesting to me that someone who trained as a sculptor has such a photographic basis for your practice that then involves drawing and then ends up becoming a painting. And you're kind of, I don't know, your versatility across all of this different media is really interesting. These are the first time, like the paintings feel like objects because I work flat. They're heavy, I'm always dragging them around, and it's a very physical process to make the work. I walk around it because I'm so short, I can't paint on a large panel on the wall. I'd only have control in the middle, nothing either end. So I work flat, but I'm actually not really moving my arms very much. It's like me walking around. Yeah. I was saying it to you. Yes. I did 23,000 steps in the studio the other day, which is something like 14 miles. That's like painting, amazing. Which was mental. So, yes, it's just a very different. And is it very physical when you're making the work? I mean, do you feel how once you've created it? I mean, does it have a natural sort of endpoint, or
the painting?
Keep coming back to it? Or?
But these was nice with the collage because we framed them in these coloured frames, so it felt like a complete. It felt complete, like it was finished. Those frames are part of the work, and the way they've been framed, you can see the way they're made. There's no, and most of them have got these like jagged edges. They're very objecty, aren't they? Because of this kind of the way that the frame's integrated within the actual image itself, and the format, the sort of sizes, they seem to talk to a kind of an art historical convention in terms of their scale. They're very small for what I'm used to working with.
Yeah, quite. Well, I think we should probably open up for some questions as we're 45 minutes in. I think I've been asked to repeat the question for the purpose of the recording. So the question was, can you talk about, in addition to Manet, other artists that you've been influenced by or interested in?
At the moment? Yeah. I'm trying to... Where do I go? Where do I start with that? It's just huge, isn't it? More specific. Give me something more specific. There's so many artists. I have I go through phases of really, really looking closely at certain artists. There's always artists on the periphery that will always be there. And actually at the moment, I've just been reading biographies. I haven't been looking at any artists.
Biographies of artists?
No.
Ah.
No.
Which kind of biographies?
Like a weird group of... I read all the Stephen Fry biographies, then I read the Richard Cole's biographies, and then Nigel Slater. I know there's a theme, I can tell. And I've just been obsessed with biography and listening to biographies in the studio because I'm on a huge industrial estate. It's really noisy. Most of the time I wear headphones with noise cancelling, so I can't hear anything. And I've just realised how brilliant Audible is. So now I listen to biographies all the time in the studio, mixed in with a bit of George Orwell. That's really what I'm reading. I'm not really looking at other artists much at the moment.
Were there artists that have been working in collage or in printmaking that you were looking at a bit more whilst you were thinking about these techniques?
Yeah, early on I was looking at lots of collage, but so much collage is with pre-existing photography. I did look. But I just try and keep it separate, so I'm not really influenced by. Yeah. Especially when it was something that I didn't feel that accomplished in or that confident with.
Well, it's really courageous to take on such a wide range of new techniques that...
Over a period of time, though, it wasn't.
Yeah, but there's quite a lot, I mean, and it is, I think, really, it looks like you're kind of, you make it look very easy, I would say. But you were, I appreciate, with very expert, in very expert hands.
Perhaps it's just my vantage point, but you mentioned that you were a sculptor before, or maybe still.
Well, my sculpture was terrible, but I did study sculpture, and I think very three-dimensionally.
So I was wondering, because of these works here, the sense of your highlights and your use of white as reflections and also the paler colors, that seems so sculptural in the way you presented them.
So that just for the recording, the question, I guess, is about the sculptural aspect to your practice in terms of the way that you handle forms, you deconstruct imagery.
So it's taking the original photograph, which is of an object, but obviously it's two-dimensional, and then drawing it to take as much information out as possible. So the drawing I use is kind of just held together. There's just enough information to hold it together. And then with the process, which is normally painting, is then reconstructing it in oil paint. So there's like a reconstruction of the object. Yeah,
but I could understand where the question is coming from the point of view that it's one that contributes towards a fragmentation of the form. It's like a dissembling of it, and then it's not designed to sort of feel flat, for
No.
example. It feels, and these edges.
And this is what I like about the collage. It really
Yeah.
was sticking it physically, building it back together, because they're quite layered, and my paintings are all, because it's all painted in one go, it's just one layer of paint. It's not layers and layers and layers of paint, whereas these are pretty layered. So there's a different feel to it.
Yeah. I think this artistic impulse to deconstruct things is really interesting, and the fact that you work with an image recurringly and you return to it in order then to use different media to kind of deconstruct and reconstruct it, I think is really is an interesting artistic impulse, but it is also one that comes out of a desire to assemble something. It's a very specific kind of
and maybe that's
construction.
why they are collage for, because they're understanding the painting in some way, in a different way, or seeing it from a different place.
And also the way that the imageries very often will sit in a space where it teeters between an abstraction and a figuration. It sort of encourages an act of assembling by the viewer.
That's happening from the drawing process, by taking out information and then reconstructing it in a different way.
Yeah, but it involves the viewer to kind of then do the work to sort of reconstruct it. It's an encounter that feels like it's one of assembling almost with you. So it is very much a making, like a sculptural thing that comes out of all of this work. It's quite interesting. Sorry. Yeah.
Why do flowers feature so much in your work?
Sorry, I can't.
Why do flowers feature so much in your work?
A good question. I don't know. It has been recent. I haven't painted flowers for a long time. It's not something I've been painting for years and years. It's something that's come recently. I was quite ill a few years ago, and I had a lot of flowers. They came and I photographed them until they died, and kept photographing them. And a lot of those paintings went away. Those photographs went away, and then now it's not quite so raw. I've started working with a lot of those photographs. So I think that's probably why.
Yes. Emma.
I was only going to go back to that thing about deconstructing an image, and I'm wondering, it's really interesting to hear about your process, whether the parallels between the collage process, that kind of layering and staging that happens in print, is got kind of similar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you're sort of building up your image.
Really, it is really similar. It is really, really similar. And I think that's why this worked for me, that I could do the three types of work together.
Yeah. Any other questions? Observations?
Brilliant.
No? Great. Well, Claire, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
It's been really interesting
Thank you.
talking to you.